Thorough application with linseed oil paint on metal surfaces outdoors provides a rust protection that is lasting. Where metal for use indoors is concerned, the anti-rust paint iron oxide minium should not be used. Before you begin, make sure that you have everything you need. Paint in the colour of your choice. The anti-rust iron primer. Balsam turpentine. An empty pot to mix the paint in. Stick for stirring the paint with. Appropriate brushes. Gauges for measuring quantities. A cloth for wiping the brushes and hands. Soap for washing the brushes and hands. Before you begin, we recommend that you first read the application instructions and tips included in our brochure and on our website. Estimated rate of distribution per coat on a smooth metal surface is between 12 to 20 square metres per litre of paint. The drying time of the paint is between 2 to 3 days under normal drying conditions. The optimal temperature to apply the paint is approximately 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. Make sure that you have good ventilation in the room you're painting in, especially for drying purposes. Check that the object that you're painting is clean of rust and any other damage. Open the can of iron primer with a putty knife or similar so as not to damage the lid. It will then tightly seal the contents when it's put back on again and protect the paint for a long period of time. Pour the paint into a larger pot so that you can mix it well. Scrape off the paint residue with the putty knife so that the entire contents are used. Mark a measuring gauge so that you can measure out 10% balsam turpentine. Pour it into the iron primer and mix well. Wipe the stick with a brush to avoid any mess. Always mix the paint before painting so that it is homogeneous. Avoid dipping the brush too deeply so that you get too much paint on it. Otherwise it can be difficult to apply the paint evenly. Not so much paint is required as this rust protective paint covers extremely well. As it is quite an even metal plate surface that we're going to paint, we're using a large primer brush that covers a large area. Work the paint in using repeated brush strokes and finish off with long, smooth strokes along the metal plate. As you can see, the coverage is very good. Finish painting with long strokes over the entire metal surface so that it has a smooth and even finish. Place the brush in raw linseed oil until it is time to use it again. Replace the lid on the pot containing the paint and mark it so that you know just what there is in the paint store. The second coat can be applied once the paint is completely dry after about 2 days. Clean the brush of any excess linseed oil before applying the next coat and wipe it with a cloth. For the second coat, we're using undiluted iron primer. Stir thoroughly so that the paint is completely homogeneous. Avoid dipping the brush too deeply as it will be more difficult to apply the paint evenly. Paint using the same technique as previously with long strokes along the entire metal surface. Wash the brush with soap and water so that it is ready for the final application, which is to be in a different shade. We have chosen graphite grey as the final shade. This paint also has a high density and must be stirred thoroughly. Paint using the same technique. A small amount of paint on the brush and finish off with long brush strokes. Note that the paint almost covers after the first coat. After painting, the brush has been standing in raw linseed oil and can now be easily prepared for the final application, which is done when the paint is completely dry after about 2 days. Stir thoroughly before painting. The final coat is what makes the final finish, so make the finish as good as possible using repeated long strokes of the brush. It is important that you rinse the cloth in water before throwing it away to prevent spontaneous combustion. Wash the brushes in soap and water. It is a good investment to look after your brushes, as a good brush is expensive. A second-hand, well-maintained brush is also better to work with than one that is brand new. If you intend to continue painting in a few days using the same paint, it is not necessary to wash the brushes, but just let them remain in raw linseed oil so that the paint doesn't dry. Linseed oil paint on metal has very good adhesion and durability properties and provides a beautiful semi-gloss finish.